So here's a little educational video for you on how much your hand position can affect your core usage and your neutral pelvis. So in riding, you want to have a neutral pelvis, meaning that your pelvis is straight up and down. This would be neutral. This would be an anterior rotation. And this would be driving your tailbone under. So that would look like this versus this. And then here's neutral. So that means your core muscles, which would be in front of the spine, and your low back muscles, which would be behind your spine, are able to actually support your pelvis. And why that's important is that puts your seat bones in contact with the saddle and gives you a wide base of support. So that your hip angle, which your hip is a ball and socket joint and actually has quite a bit of mobility here, is able to move with and influence the movement of the horse. And so your neutral pelvis is the desirable angle to have for riding. So that again looks like this. And if you have a belt on, I always say like your belt buckle should be level with the back of your belt, okay? So that's your neutral pelvis. And for many women, we struggle easily with anterior rotation, which is kind of this curve in the low back, which makes your core very unstable. And that actually locks your hip joint. So it makes your hip joint very unable in this position to actually go a full rotation. And that's really important because for a lot of us, if you're trying to move a horse through the back or get them forward or get them straight, if your hip angle is blocked, they're not going to be able to follow through because you're going to actually be blocking that movement by sitting on top of them with a closed hip angle. So getting to the hands, if you're in an anterior rotation, it's very easy to lock your elbows forward and against your core. So when I have my hands forward and my core backward, in this position, I'm not able to influence the horse's movement and I'm not able to stabilize my pelvis with my core muscles. So if my hands are forward, my hips are back. And what that also does, it drops my sternum, disengages my core, and it rotates my palms usually. Almost always when you see this position with the locked elbows, or what I call Muppet arms, is you're gonna see rotated palms. So that does several things. That makes your rein aids backward against the horse. So as you're riding against the horse, you end up getting this hand coming against hip motion. So it's actually called a clashed aid. When your hip motion and your hand motion come against each other, and that drives the horse's shoulders down just by those two movements kind of clashing, and it definitely is going to interfere with the horse's forward movement. So a sticky horse is going to be unable to go forward, and a nervous horse is going to be driven half crazy by that feeling. So if your palms are forward, your core is back, your seat bones are behind you, you're not able to support your body with your core, and you're certainly not able to influence the horse's movement. So what you want to have is elbows that frame your side, and you want to have your thumbs on the top, you want to have your pinky on the bottom, and you want to have each finger close against the other without gripping, and your thumb makes a nice little roof on the top. And that's not to be confused with like having to have these perfectly glued stilled hands, because you can see how much tension that brings into my midsection. So if we're riding from the midsection, this actually closes my core. And if you try this yourself, you'll feel that your hips actually really stiffen. So elbows frame the core. So here you can see I have a nice flat back. Core is able to stay nice and strong here. I can move my hips. If you saw me on a horse, you'd see that I could move my hips in this position. Thumbs are on the top, and this allows me, as I follow the motion of the horse, to keep my hand from coming backward against the hip motion. So my hip would be able to come through. And you can't see my bottom ribs, obviously, because I have skin and stuff on me, but my bottom ribs, I always tell my students, blossom your bottom ribs through your elbows. This gives me a nice open chest, it gives me a nice base of support, and it makes me very stable. From this position, I can influence the horse's movement well, and I certainly can absorb the shock of their movement. But watch, as soon as I turn my palm forward, it drives my seat bones backward. Okay, so having your thumbs on the top, your hands framed beside your core makes a huge difference for your stability and your usage of your core muscles. So this is the classical position of holding the hands. And the reason is because it makes your seat level, makes your core stable, it makes your ribs support, makes you able to breathe and get deep breaths in your diaphragm. And then we can get into what we call finger riding, which is essentially where your fingers make small actions on the reins, but your hands are not making those actions. In other words, if I need to make a half halt, it's a finger motion versus a pulling hand motion, which you can see would really change and disturb my balance and certainly the horse's balance. So think about, as you're riding today, what position are your hands in? Because that's going to affect your core stability. And another hand position that's actually become very popularized today, which is to artificially leverage the horse's head up or down, is to raise the hands up or lower the hands down. And you can see that each one of those has a disrupting of my core stability, of my center. So I'm not able to ride from center when my hands are doing really exaggerated things to artificially manipulate the horse's headset. So in the classical tradition, when you're riding from your center, your seat, you're influencing the horse through and beneath you, and you're receiving it in your hand, versus manipulating the horse's head and neck via the hand and hoping your body just is somewhere on top. So think about that as you ride today. Think about your hand position. Again, don't get frozen in one position. That's not at all what I'm talking about. It's not that you have to have these perfect like equitation. It's just think, do your hands complement your midsection, or are they opposed?